Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, August 16th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 17 days. The game against Michigan in 103 days. Saturday was the first scrimmage of the fall for the Ohio State football team, and at the end meant the end of the second week of fall camp. That was something that the Ohio State coaching staff had pointed to as a major milestone as it tries to finalize some of the starting positions for this year's team. The event was closed to the media, but of course, Nevada Bucks wise men had a full report on the Ask the Insiders board at Buckeye Scoop. Nevada joins me to discuss some of the things he learned over the weekend. Nevada, let's start with the position that everyone always asks about first, the quarterbacks. Do the Buckeyes know for sure who their starter is going to be?
Well, I think they do. It's going to be C.J. Stroud. He's going to be the starter. He's the one who took the majority of the reps on Saturday. I think, he's clearly the number one guy. I mean, he looks the most in command out there, both on and off the field. He's kind of the alpha dog. And, he's really a guy that Ohio State feels like they can build around. He can do, a little bit of everything. He can pass, he can run, and, very smart guy, big arm. So I think he's the guy. I should say, I know he's the guy. It's just a matter of when they're going to announce it. I would expect an announcement to come here shortly, and they'll probably say something along the lines of Stroud will start and Miller and McCord will, both play liberally in the backup role. So it's, and then you got Quinn Ewers coming into the mix tomorrow. So it's not going to be a dull moment around the Ohio State fall camp. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to talk to Ryan Day on Monday, and yes, so we may get a final answer, or at least a next step kind of answer on starting quarterback. And yes, Quinn Ewers is officially now a member of the Ohio State football team. If you did not see the interview that Kirk Barton did with him over the weekend, it came out on Friday night at BuckeyeScoop.com. You can find that on our YouTube channel. You can find that on the Scoop World Order podcast feed. We also dropped it as a bonus episode on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. So lots of different places to check that out. That is absolutely worth listening to. I'm going to guess Ryan Day is going to get a few questions about Quinn Ewers now that he can finally talk about him. So that's going to be another fun conversation a little later on Monday. Another very popular topic of conversation this fall has been the two elite true freshman defensive ends, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. Now, Tuimoloau just lost his black stripe over the weekend. That's always a good sign for a brand new player. What are you hearing about those two guys and the likelihood that they'll be serious contributors this fall?
Well, I think they're both going to be serious contributors for sure. And, Sawyer came out of the gate, super strong, went through a little bit of a funk for about the last week and really kind of reasserted himself at the scrimmage on Saturday. Was really disruptive, played really well, just a very polished player. Very advanced in terms of hand technique and hand fighting and arm positioning and swim moves. I mean, he's got it all. And, JT, he lost his black stripe in one of the quickest black stripe removals that we've ever seen. He's been tremendous. He's a guy that, came in late, really was kind of behind the eight ball from that standpoint, and has just been, he's been great the last week of camp. He's really catching up to the speed. And they're using him situationally. They're using him in the Rushman package, and they like him a lot. And there's lots to like. He's a great player and really worthy of that number one ranking.
Another guy who I think a lot of people are looking at as a potential breakout candidate this year is Zach Harrison. He came in a couple of years ago with a ton of hype, a ton of potential, but as Urban Meyer always liked to say, potential just means you haven't done it yet. So are things coming together for him to really kind of put those things all together and have that big season people have kind of been waiting on from him this fall?
I think so. And, Zach's been a guy that, I haven't been as high on as other people have been the last couple of years, just because, I don't feel like he's got so much potential and he just hasn't really played up to it. But I think he's starting to figure it out now. And, I thought he had a bad habit of kind of standing up at the snap and letting guys kind of get into his, that long body. And now he's doing a much better job with those long arms, keeping guys off, fending them off, keeping them away from him. And it's showing when he's out there on the field. So I think he's going to have the type of year that we've all been waiting for from him. And it's really great because he's a great kid, easy to root for. And, he's been looking really good for the OSU defense all fall.
We have been hearing a lot about Travion Henderson this fall from you, from Bill Green, from just about everyone, how he's been dominant on the ground. But it sounds like there was maybe a different running back who really jumped out on Saturday during the scrimmage. Let people know about Mayan Williams.
Yeah, Mayan's a guy that came out of Cincinnati, out of high school, 3-star recruit, a guy that really was, a lot of people were just kind of going, when he committed. and boy, he's good. I mean, he really dominated the scrimmage on Saturday, played really well, runs really hard. Showed glimpses of it last year with those terrific feet against Clemson in very limited action, but shows what he can do. He's in great shape as well. And I go as far as say, if they line up against Minnesota, I think he'll be the starting running back, and I think he'll get the first carry of the year. He's that good, but again, I got to go back to Trey Henderson. Trey Henderson literally breaks off a 60 or 70 yard run every single practice, which either means he's really good or OSU defense is really bad. And I just happen to think, I think it means that he's really good. But he is the human highlight film, and Mayan Williams and Trey Henderson are going to be a fun 1-2 punch to watch.
You bring up an interesting question there because, spring ball, when fans are watching the spring game or, spring camp, fall camp, you're playing against your teammates. So everything is sort of a zero-sum game. So every 70-yard touchdown you get for the offense is a 70-yard touchdown that the defense gave up. So every time the offense gets sacked, that's good news for the defense, but it's bad news for the offense. So do you have a sense for whether the offense or the defense is kind of getting the better of things overall this camp? And, is that whatever that answer is that good news or is that bad news for Ohio State that one or the other is kind of getting the better of things right now?
Well, it's definitely been the OSU offense has had the better all the way up until the scrimmage. And I thought the scrimmage was pretty even, and I thought that was a good sign because up until now, I think the offense has been dominating, and the defense really took a step forward in the scrimmage on Saturday, which I thought was a positive. But at the end of the day, Bill Green always points out to if you're going to win, you got to score 40 points a game in the playoffs. And so if I'm given my choice, you need to have that prolific offense. And Ohio State definitely has that prolific offense. I think that the name of the season is going to be we're going to score a lot and then just pray for stops. And that's kind of the game now. That's kind of the modern game of football. It's can you get 4 or 5 stops a game, and can you score just about every time you have the ball? And I think that there's going to be a lot of high scoring games this year for Ohio State, and the Ohio State offense is going to be right there, going to be one of the best in the country.
I wanted to switch gears here for a minute and talk a little bit about one of the most popular conversations we seem to be having these days, conference realignment. There was a report this weekend that the Big Ten and ACC and Pac-12 are in conversations about forming some kind of an alliance, and that could be a scheduling alliance. It could also be an alliance of those 3 conferences working together and voting together to counter the growing power of the SEC. So what are you hearing about that? And does that have any impact in your mind on the potential future likelihood of the Big Ten rating either the ACC or the Pac-12 to steal a team in conference realignment in the future?
Well, I think what you're seeing really is this alliance thing is really we've talked about Kevin Warren really not being part of the expansion conversations and really been kind of relegated to a backseat. I think you're seeing why this is that he's kind of spearheading this alliance type of setup where they try to have some sort of a voting block that provides a counterbalance to the SEC's increasing influence on the college football playoff and college football in general. And so I think this is kind of Warren's answer to that is let's ally with the ACC and the Pac-12 and align our voting and maybe do some cross scheduling and some things like that, while the university presidents and Fox are pushing hard on this expansion thing, which is the thing that I've been talking about. And I think it's really going to come down to the enforceability of the grant of rights for the ACC, which is, as we know, that runs through 2036, I believe it is. So that's way out there. But the Pac-12's contract's up soon, so those schools are in play. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I think you're seeing kind of a little bit of a bifurcation between what Kevin Warren and the commissioners are looking at and what the university presidents and the broadcast partners are looking at. And that's kind of that thing's playing out in real time.
Yeah, that's interesting because, you and I talked a little bit last week, I think it was on Saturday's Morning Scoop, about the potential loophole in the ACC's grant of rights that maybe the Big Ten could exploit that in order to add schools like North Carolina and Virginia, because that was sort of viewed as this, unbreakable thing that ran through 2036. And now it's like, well, maybe not. But as you said, there is no concern like that with the Pac-12 because their conference TV deal expires so soon. It's in 2024. So even if there is a grant of rights through 2024, like you just wait that out and that's not necessarily a concern. So, to me, that makes it logical that additions from the Pac-12 are maybe more likely than the SEC because it's just you don't have to try and get through that loophole? Or does that not necessarily matter and they may just kind of go after both? Do you have a sense for that?
I think that the Pac-12, rating the Pac-12 is a much more likely scenario than the breaking of the grant of rights and the pulling from the ACC. But I think they're both in play. But if you have gun to my head, which one do I think is more likely? I'd say the Pac-12 scenario is the one that's more likely because you've got schools that are really not financially encumbered. There's not a difficult case that they're going to have to get through. And they're motivated to do so. And the numbers, if you look at the Pac-12 current contract compared to the Big Ten, and then you project that what the future one's going to be, again, the deltas are so big that the Pac-12 schools have got a huge financial incentive to make this move. So I'd say that's the most likely path.
Every time we've talked about this, USC has always been the top team at the top of the list, about A, who the Big Ten would want, but B, also who might be the most likely from the Pac-12 to be willing to make that jump. So are they still in the top of both of those lists? And, they're probably not coming alone. And I feel like who's number 2 on that list has been a little bit more flexible than USC, who's kind of just been right at the top of the list every time we've had this conversation. Who's kind of looking like they might be the second school from the Pac-12 if and when the Big Ten does go and raid the Pac-12 for some new members?
Well, as you said, USC is definitely, the leader of the pack, as it were, in terms of the movement. Like you said, the second's been a little bit more flexible. Right now, I think the group that's been the most aggressive, leaning forward the most, has been Oregon. And so it's, a USC-Oregon tandem right now. Although, I think, having 4 teams come is not out of the realm of possibility. And, then you get into the Washingtons, the Utahs, the Colorados, the Arizonas, so you've got, obviously UCLA, Stanford, you've got a number of high academic schools in great demographic markets. So like I said, so much, there's so much in play there that it's really going to come down to dollars and cents from Fox. The Big Ten is the number one thing that the Big Ten is looking for is they want a guarantee from Fox that if they add these schools, that the net number that they're getting to everybody goes up. And you can't stay the same and it can't go down. And so, that's the numbers, the challenge that Fox is crunching and running through the scenarios right now. And I think that's going to ultimately drive all these discussions and ultimately the decisions.
When you hear people talk about the Big Ten potentially expanding, you hear a lot of, well, they'll add a couple teams and go from 14 to 16, or, maybe they'll go really crazy and go from 14 to 20. But the last time we talked about this, you mentioned the possibility of a 24-team super conference. And, after we hung up and we're done with the show, I was just thinking about that. And there are so many possibilities. If you're adding 10 more teams, I mean, you could take basically the whole Pac-12, the schools that you wanted from the Pac-12. You could take a huge chunk of the ACC and let the SEC pillage the rest. And then the ACC kind of goes, up in dust. It could be some combination of those. If it is a mixture of ACC and Pac-12 teams, do you have a sense for roughly how many might come from each league? Would this just be like, they would add potentially, 2, 3, 4 from the ACC and, a big chunk of the Pac-12 focus on really locking down that West Coast? Or is this like way too soon to be thinking about this kind of stuff?
Well, I think this is all a long-term process. So, I think, it's a little premature to be talking about it. But, in my mind's eye, I look at it and I really think the positioning where the Big Ten wants to end up is superior sports, superior academics. And so you're just looking for those schools that kind of meet that criteria, because not all those schools fit in the SEC. You know what I'm saying? If you look at the SEC schools, they're not exactly bastions of higher education. So, I think the Big Ten wants to see themselves as kind of that citadel for that. And there's a lot of schools that when you talk about Stanford and you talk about Berkeley and you talk about, Washington, which is a great school, or Virginia or UNC, you know what I'm saying? You just kind of see which schools kind of fit in this. And then you look at ACC, you look at Clemson and go, well, boy, they probably fit more in the SEC. So I think that's ultimately how this thing's going to break down. I'd probably say 6 from the Pac-10 and 4 from the ACC. And, maybe you grab Georgia Tech and and then one other, and you figure out, how that thing fits. But, the Big Ten wants to be coast to coast, top to bottom, great sports, great research, great academics. And I think that's what they're going to end up with.
Well, this is not something that's probably going to get resolved sometime this week, but it has just been fascinating to follow this whole process as the future of college football is sort of getting reshaped right now in front of our eyes. So this is always a fun conversation to have, do a little daydreaming maybe, but also kind of know these conversations are actually happening right now. The future of college football, whatever college football is going to look like 40 years from now, those conversations are happening this week. So Nevada, thank you for joining me. Always appreciate your insight and all that kind of stuff. And also on the Ohio State Scrimmage, lots and lots of interesting stuff to talk about there. This is going to be, we're under just over 2 weeks to go until the start of the 2021 Ohio State football season. So in addition to the conference realignment talk, there is a lot of Ohio State football talk we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks as the 2021 Ohio State football team really kind of takes its final shape heading into that Minnesota game on September 2nd. And we will have more coverage later on today at BuckeyeScoop.com. Ryan Day, special teams coach Parker Fleming. We'll have interviews with those guys. I'm sure lots of interesting questions. I'm sure Ryan Day is going to have a lot to talk about today with the scrimmage now being kind of in the books and Quinn Ewers now on campus and all the other stuff going on. So the best place to find that is at BuckeyeScoop.com. The other thing you can do is check out our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, at the end of this video, there's going to be something that pops up at the end. It has another suggested video for you to watch, but also it has a little Buckeye Scoop logo, a little circle Buckeye Scoop logo. If you click on that, you'll get subscribed to our channel. And what that'll do is when we start streaming the Ryan Day interviews later on today, or the Parker Fleming interviews, or player and coach interviews later in the week, we're talking the defensive lineman tomorrow. That's probably going to be something of interest to most of you guys. There's going to be a lot of that stuff coming up this week live on BuckeyeScoop.com. You can watch all those things live. We'll have clips of some of the more interesting things people say. That's all at YouTube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Just click on that thing at the end of this video, the little Buckeye Scoop logo, and you can be subscribed to our channel, or click on the bell on our channel if you want to do it that way. You'll be subscribed. You get notified every time we post a new video, so you never miss anything. And also do make sure you check out all of our great podcasts. They're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it. We're there. You know about Buckeye. You know about Buckeye Weekly. You know about Morning Scoop. Scoop World Order. Kirk Barton just had that exclusive interview with Quinn Ewers over the weekend. He's had incredible guests on. He's had Urban Meyer. He's had Orlando Pace. He has Nevada on sometimes. He has Bill Green on sometimes. Mark Givler and Bill Green did another episode of their Vegas Knows podcast talking a little bit about gambling. They've also got the Gives in the Bank podcast talking about recruiting and the Ohio State football team in general. The best way to find all of those podcasts is just to search Buckeye Scoop on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. You can subscribe right there. That way you'll never miss an episode. You can also leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows as well, which we do genuinely appreciate. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.